Good evening. Dr. Thomason, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Would you please do roll call?
President Kaler, members of the board, please let the record show that we have all 5 board members in attendance tonight.
Reunited. I'm going to go on to a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance, but first I would like to read a quote just for the times of today. And this is from Cornel West, and he writes, "None of us alone can save the nation or the world, but each of us can make a positive difference if we commit ourselves to do so." I move that we approve the agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Everybody said aye. Motion passes 5-0. Superintendent's report, upcoming events. Dr. Thomason.
President Kaler, members of the board, we are in the summertime and we have a couple of events coming up. Saturday, June 20th, we have our governing board retreat on Saturday morning at 8 a.m. right here in the governing board room. And then on Wednesday, June 24th, we have our next governing board meeting at 5:30 p.m. here in the governing board room. That's the events coming up for the next month.
Thank you. And I know our retreat is at 8 a.m. and it's usually held in the back room. By June 20th, is there any recommendations coming for us that we can have any type of audience, or is it going to be this setup still June 20th, or June 20th and 24th?
Yeah. President Kaler, members of the board, we still watch that on a daily basis. Right now, according to Governor Ducey, we're still in phase 1, and so we will be holding there until we hear differently.
Very good. I had people asking about the work study coming up at the end of the month, and I wanted to make sure I don't invite people that can't come in. Okay, board comments. Mrs. Wilson, I believe, has something to say.
I just wanted to thank everybody who had anything to do with our graduations. I got to watch them. I know it was at the beginning of this cycle, so it's been a while for us, but they just turned out so great, and I just want to thank all of you because I know, especially Dr. Foley, on how much time and energy you put into them, and I just appreciate it, and they turned out really magnificent.
Our administrative team and our HCPA were amazing. This was truly a Higley United leadership effort, and I'm proud of everybody, so thank you for that.
Mr. Witovich.
I would just like to say I've been gone for the last 3 months, and if everybody who doesn't know, one of my sons came down with the virus. Our family experienced this personally. He was a healthy 28-year-old, no pre-existing athletic, and he crossed paths with somebody in a supermarket. We nearly lost him. He was in intensive care for 3 weeks, and when you see statistics on television and you do not have a clue what it's like for us as a family to go through when your child is in intensive care and you cannot go to them and you cannot do anything. And I can't thank everyone enough for the prayers and kind thoughts that people were sending our way, but it's still not over with. He still can only walk a block now. He's still taking steroids, trying to build up his lung capacity. So this is a very evil virus, and just because you cannot see it, it can strike any one of us. And I just want everybody to understand is, be safe out here. Please, please, please do not let your guard down just because you cannot see something, because it's absolutely terrible. But I want to thank everybody for the prayers and kind words that came our way.
And then you had your mother-in-law also in the hospital at the same time, and
yes. So it's just
you had a lot.
Yes.
So welcome back.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be back.
Thank you for sharing. Mr. Glover.
Thank you. I echo the sentiments of both of you, and the high school graduation was great, and I agree, we have to be, you don't, it shouldn't happen to you to have a concern for other people, and I think that's a lesson we all could learn. And so on the way here, I was just reflecting, and I'm going to take a little bit of time, but hopefully not too much, about what a time to be on a school board. All the things we've been through in the past 4 years, and just the events of the last 2 weeks, I feel like, here we are again. I remember when Red for Ed started, and there was, a room full of very nervous people, of staff members, and thinking about people looking to their leaders. And I remember that some districts were eerily silent out of fear of rocking the boat. And if it were left up to them, nothing would have changed. And because of Red for Ed, we've seen great changes as a result of that movement, and I will forever be proud of this board and our administration for not being scared into silence at that moment. But I feel like we're also at another one of those moments. So I just want to take a minute to let people know that I see what's going on around us, and like so many millions of others, deeply affected by it. I have a son in Minneapolis, St. Paul, that goes to school there, so he knows the area, the people, the community, the police. We've had a lot of conversations, very heartfelt, so I'm talking about the peaceful protests that are going on around the world right now, galvanized by the murder of George Floyd. And so, I just wanted to reiterate, I'm a citizen, I'm a descendant of immigrants, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a teacher, but I've been listening, I've been willing to learn, I'm willing to lead, I'm willing to grow, I'm willing to change, and I am committed, I'm telling you and everybody who happens to see this, that I'm committed to doing more. That became the message that I'm getting, is everyone has to do more. And America needs to grow and evolve, as we have since the birth of our nation. We need to be actively more inclusive. We need to be anti-racist. And thankfully, we live in a place that has a system that's set up where we can mature and change if enough of us decide that it is time to change. And every time as a nation that we've been more inclusive, we've gotten stronger, allowing non-property owners to vote, allowing women to vote, or allowing people of color to vote, eliminating poll taxes, letting 18 to 20-year-olds vote, standing up for human rights, standing up for civil rights. We've gotten better and stronger, and I hope that through dialogue that we start to have these difficult, uncomfortable conversations that we need to have in order to grow stronger and face the current realities in which we really all do live. And American public education, that beloved cornerstone of democracy that I always talk about, has been the envy of the world for many generations because on its face, it's open to everyone. So once again, public education will be needed to help fix what's ailing us. And I don't mistake criticizing the status quo as being unpatriotic. I would argue that working to make the country a better place is very patriotic, very necessary work, and it's one of the principles upon which this nation was founded. To form a more perfect union. It didn't say we were perfect. So it's going to be teachers, that's why I wanted to mention it here, it's going to be teachers that are once again being asked to do more and rising to the challenge, as we've always done, which is why I wanted to mention it here now today. And so I hope that people, teachers, students, will look into their hearts and into the eyes of their neighbors and decide that yes, we can do better, we must do better, and Black lives do matter. It's hard, uncomfortable work, but it's worth it. And when have our teachers ever been afraid of hard work? What did we do over the course of 2 weeks? We retooled an entire industry to deliver online instruction. We did that. So we all have to rise to the challenges and the promises of American public ed. So that's why I knelt during our moment of silence. And I felt compelled not to be silent on this issue today, and I'm glad. Thank you, President Kaler, for saying something. And I just sincerely hope that my colleagues, our teachers, our students, our parents, and our community will join all together in this fight for justice.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Beautiful sentiments, as always. Thank you. Okay. Need a pause. We are going to move on to consent agenda items. I move that we approve consent agenda items 5.1 through 5.10. Comments, questions, and concerns. I have one question and then, well, I have a couple questions. Dr. Thomason, on the, in the vouchers, we bought some math curriculum. Can you please let us know what that was for, please?
President Caleb, members of the board, the math curriculum that we're looking at was a math curriculum purchased for our gifted and talented program. Dr. Foley has more information on that too, but it was for our special programs throughout the district for our gifted program. Alex was on there too, and Alex is a computerized program that we have with our math adoption that we utilize at our upper grade levels.
Did you ask a question, or did you get to, I mean, was that an answer, or did you looking for more? I guess I have a comment I want to make after, but I don't want to interrupt.
I can provide additional information. Okay, so a couple curriculum pieces on there. So obviously we have core programs and we have supplemental programs, and sometimes there's curriculum realignment, and if there's a gap, you identify a supplemental for that. So what you saw on the Alex was an important one, because Alex was one of the, and you saw it for 612, you saw that that was something that had been part of the original, well, it had been something that would have been thrown in with the original purchase that was being utilized, and sometimes free things end up being well-used things that become a core part of our curriculum, our supplemental curriculum. We monitored very closely this year, knowing that this was a heavily utilized resource, the usage report of that, to make sure that it yielded outcomes. It's the kind of the online supplemental part to this. I will tell you that it is ideal that we had this, particularly as we transitioned into more remote online individualized learning. But again, this was a heavily utilized resource that was worth continuing as a supplemental. There's also some realignment going on in the gifted and talented program to ensure that we have enriched opportunities for all of our students across. That will be one of our updated presentations for you in the near future, but this is the curriculum that is supplemental to that alignment that is being used for those gifted programs across the district, and it will be part of an update for us as a work study in the near future.
Okay, usually that's what I guess was my next question, is usually comes before us and we have a little bit more information. Alex, I know in the previous, that did come with our free,
Yep.
and we always knew that it was probably going to come around and stay because it was such a great asset to our math program.
Yep.
So,
and then there's the difference, very good point, your difference between your supplementals and your core program. So when we do a core adoption program, there's a tight process with procurement that involves reviews, committees, and a 30-day review. Supplementals are a little different, and they don't go through that same process, but there still is a curriculum review, and they're sort of an addition to, not a part of the core process. So those are supplementals to supplement the core that go through a different process. So we can easily probably also do a nice update in the future, if you'd like to, on the processes for our supplemental and our core programs, particularly as we embark on our adoption for science and implementing our first core program that we will use a new process with that's very tight and aligned with procurement, very procedural. So that is something we worked on outlining this year, and cleaning up our getting clarity for me coming in new as in curriculum. What are our core? What are our supplementals? What funding sources do we use? What is our cycle? What is our processes? So,
and Dr. Foley, prior to you coming back, there was a lot of discussion amongst the board on what was supplemental, which Mr. Glover was probably dying to comment right now. So I'll hand it over.
Okay, well, yeah, you know, that's one of the grotesque things about textbooks companies, is they do give you stuff for like 3 years, and then you do have to just say, like, this is going to be an ongoing cost until the next adoption. I don't love it. It's part of this game, but I get it. But we talked about we have talked about supplementals and what's the other word? Core content, core stuff. We talked about putting a list online, and I'd like to maybe take this time, maybe can we shoot for October? Here's what I'm thinking. We do know what math is. We do know what ELA is. Yep. I think we have a good sense of title, probably. and then maybe some, what was the other one? Oh, Gifted, I think, and Gifted. So maybe start to get those online by October, because what bothers me about, like Alex, is teachers get used to it, and it's, $100,000. Okay, you just assume that that's $100,000 we can't put towards health insurance or salaries or things like that. So if there was a list that they can know, and then Dr. Foley and I have had this conversation, and I have complete confidence in the job she's going to do. But if we were to go through an adoption and we're told that gifted math it's all good, it's all covered, and then you come to find out 3 years later it's not covered, that's an expense. Teachers really have to have an understanding that means less money to any other things. So we have to do a really good job, and I know that you have a system in place, and it will be good moving forward.
You bring up a good point, because it is understanding the processes for core and supplemental, because some of these things come with consumables that are annual expenses that you have to budget and understand how long licenses are for. And as new adoptions happen that are electronic and subscriptions, once upon a time, if you didn't have a budget if you had to cut money, for instance, you still had textbooks in the warehouse if you weren't able to afford an adoption. When you go to subscriptions and there isn't money, they go away. So knowing there are ongoing costs associated with both, but understanding the process and ensuring that we're clear and consistent across the board. Yes.
And President Kaler and members of the board, in the same vein, there was another math program too that we decided not to renew, and that was for the younger grades because it wasn't working out the way that we needed it to work out for our students in the curriculum and math programs.
Yes, I think just on the same topic, like Mr. Glover had said, there was a lot of conversation with the board on supplementals and what was being used, what was being district provided, what was being provided at the site. And when we made our math adoption, and even our ELA, but we had so many different supplementals out there that we didn't know what was being used. And different sites use different supplementals, even different grades or teachers were using different things. And so when we spent and committed those funds for our new math adoption, we needed to make sure that the tools that it came with had fidelity, we were using it, because we do need to know, does it work, does it not work? Bottom line is, when they're selling a curriculum, they're selling, and they're touching on the high points, and they're not talking about the pitfalls, and they're not talking about the other parts of it that when you get into it and you use, then you don't know. And so I think that that's why this particular subject's a little touchy. Is then there was a lot of talk about policy and the board approving supplementals, so we know what's out there. And I think that that's why the question has come up, is we see it in the vouchers, but we were unaware of a supplemental because it didn't come before us. So I think that that's the questions that have arisen, is because then we need to make sure, like Alex was part of the adoption. We knew that that was part of it. And again, it's a selling feature. They offered to provide it to us for the first year. There was some negotiations. They extended that time, but that is an ongoing subscription. But we needed to make time to find out, is it working? Are we utilizing it? Because do we want to pay for something that we're not utilizing, or we can't use to ensure assessments are done with fidelity? And, so bringing all that forward, like Mr. Glover had asked, so that we have a clear understanding and our teachers have a clear understanding of what's available to them through our programs. So I think we've been moving along, because we talked about how long it had been since we had done a curriculum adoption. And it did. Our teachers are resourceful, and they were pulling other materials to make sure that they were current. but then we had all kinds of different things being used, and we really didn't have a good handle on it. So I think we've made strides with that. We've committed to our curriculum adoptions, and we've been moving along with them, but we just need to know, and our teachers need to know what's out there to help support them when something isn't fulfilling everything.
Yep. Good points.
Okay. My other question and concerns are with 5.8 and 5.9. Maybe Mrs. Martins can give us a little brief synopsis of why we are doing this as changing the policy versus maybe doing an addendum just for this year. What was the thought process on this?
Certainly. Good afternoon, President Kaler. Afternoon, good evening. Good evening, President Kaler, members of the board. So Dr. Thomason and I were in discussion about these policies even prior to all of the COVID-19. And I had said to him when I had arrived that I thought it was interesting for the administrators as well as our support staff according to policy in terms of the amount of carryover. Traditionally, from where I had been, carryover was a minimum of 2 years, if not more, for individuals, because it is typically hard for administrators to take off time, especially when they're 12-month administrators. Usually they only have one limited window of time to take off, and unfortunately, this year, I'll move on to that, it looks a little different. So we had started to ponder the conversation even prior to all of this and said, that would be a discussion for a different day, because I understand that it wasn't too long prior to my arrival that the policy was limited. My understanding, and I could be wrong, but there was no cap, which caused concerns, and then a cap was created. And I said, well, maybe we can look at a compromise in terms of what that could look like, because I think 1 year could be limiting. And so over the recent few weeks, there had been concerns brought to the district office from other administrators in regards to not being able to utilize their vacation time because of the fact that they had to work quite heavily. And our teams, as you all have mentioned, have been absolutely wonderful all across the board, from our administrators to our teachers to our support employees in this whole process. But like many others and myself, we had planned timed off during spring break. Some of us returned early, and a good chunk of us had not had time to take time off since then. So in conversations with Ms. Linda Good and Dr. Thomason and our cabinet, initially the discussion was to look at just a resolution temporarily. But I said, well, let me poll our other school districts too. And so in looking at our other school districts, I heard back from 7 other school districts in the East Valley. And out of those, 6 other school districts are higher in terms of their carryover, either double, so it could be as little as 4 to 7 days more that they carry over, or it's doubled, where their time period is twice or 2.5 times higher than ours. So we are one of the lower areas, and I do know it posed a question to another public school nearby in which they said, I didn't realize how low we were too. This might be a discussion that we have to evaluate. And anecdotally, I said that if we're going to address this for our administrators, we have to address this for our support staff too. Because I know teams that I've worked with and individuals that I've heard from have said in the past that they've had to take vacation because they're not going to accrue any more time if they don't take vacation. Something surprising was that actually some other school districts do not have vacation time for classified. So that was interesting. But some of the other places, again, with the exception of 2, when I heard back in terms of the classified area, there were 2 others that, again, were double in what they allowed their individuals to carry over. So we wanted to propose and have discussion as a first read of policy for this area, and see where the discussion went from there, but certainly, depending on the board's interest, can explore that a little bit more.
Mr. Glover?
Well, if you're asking for our input, the idea that you use it or lose it forces people to not be where they want to be. So I am completely in support of carrying that over for more than multiple years. Not that you asked, but if you wanted to know.
President Kaler?
Yes, Mrs. Reese.
So you bring up a good point. It wasn't very long ago, The policy refers back to 2016 that we made some changes to this because the district was put in an extremely difficult financial place. And we did get caught financially with some large burdens. And I think that part of it is, sorry, Mr. Glover, I like the thought of use it or lose it because I really firmly believe in a work-life balance, and that when they're forced to use some of that, then nobody wants to leave anything on the table. And then they're forced to use some of that, which then I believe creates a healthier environment for individuals. And so I think that that's important. But I think part of my other question with this proposal is the accountability piece and the tracking piece. And part of that goes to when we went to a 2-week break, because we used to be 1-2-1, and when we went to 2-2-2, there was a lot of discussion with our schools being closed for 2 weeks. Part of that discussion at the time was that principals would be on site 1 week and an assistant principal would be on site the other week. So with our 12-month administrators and with our school breaks and everything, how does that work? If they are gone for a week during break, is that considered vacation time? Is it not considered vacation time? When we've asked them to make sure someone's on campus because we were going to be doing interventions and things like that. So can you help me understand that?
Absolutely, Vice President Reese. I certainly can't speak to any time prior to my arrival, but I do know during my arrival, from the very get-go, we had discussed during those breaks. You may or may not recall the addendums that you approved earlier this year. Our principal addendums and our assistant principal addendums, they're required to take 1 week off during winter break. So then the other breaks, we do send out information and notices and emails to remind people that if they are not physically present, they should be using their time and using that time during what best suits them. But as you know, depending on the year and what's going on in the situation, it can vary if that particular break time works for them, or depending on what's going on with their co-site administrator, if there's something going on where they have to be there the whole time because the other person's going to be gone the whole time, it can vary. But I know for myself, I can also speak for myself personally, I try to take those breaks, winter break, to spend time with my family, and I try to take at least some time during fall break or spring break, depending on what has been going on here. But as Mr. Glover shared earlier, and I hope I can share this, it's been an interesting 3 years, that's for sure. There's been a lot that has gone on. So, as I mentioned earlier, I found myself having to come back 2 days early this spring break to make sure that I was working with my colleagues and being supportive of my colleagues about where we go in terms of next steps. But I can tell you that we send out emails, we being human resources, send out emails before each break and outline and bullet the terms of what the break and the time off means for all employee groups.
And I certainly understand why we would be looking at it for this year because of the timing and when everything started to happen, and then all of a sudden the expectations, like, I'm sorry you were gonna be gone. It was an all hands on deck, and we really needed that. So I certainly understand the leeway for this year. I'm just not sure that of a policy change for going forward. So.
Yes, I have a little bit of concern. I'm still kind of reading through first time. I know we get a couple more reads, just in the fact that I don't want to put us in a financial position if we had multiple administrators all leave in the same year and there was a lot of carryover that could be very costly to us at one time. So I'm still kind of sitting on this one a little bit. Is there any other comments or questions? Mrs. Wilson?
I actually enjoy that we're going up 5 extra days, I believe. Yeah, 5 extra days. And I think it's actually smart for us to let them carry those over if possible. I tend to agree with Mr. Glover on this, but I would be happy to learn more about it and continue to on our second and third read. Is it second read? We get 2 reads on this one?
It is, yeah, a
Okay.
second read. And what I could do, members of the board, is I could, the spreadsheet that I have in place, give to Dr. Thomason to pass out to all of you so you could see where we compare with these other school districts.
Madam President? I had the same note about budget, so you know this. When people start, I mean, first of all, way back when we had budget cuts, it was like you didn't have money for anything, and then we did have exoduses of people. We don't really have that, but at some point down the road, when these folks get older, you will have to buy them out if they have unused time. So you just got to budget appropriately for that, and let's hope that we don't have massive budget cuts as we did some years ago.
Or any mass exodus. Yes, we're very grateful that all of our administrators have stayed this year. We're so very grateful. I'm going to shout out, thank you so much, 100% return. So it's not like I'm expecting that. It's just I want to be prepared for that.
Yeah. President Kaler, members of the board, before we put this policy in place to 1 year carryover, there was no cap. And so I think maybe that this is a time that we can reevaluate our situation. Maybe we went a little too far. I do believe that the unfunded burden of no cap really restricted the district, but I think a happy medium may be 2 years. Of course, this is why we're here. This is why we're discussing it, and we can arrange it or add or take away however the board feels, but I think 2 years would be a nice happy medium compared to where we were, and then we got extremely restrictive for 1 year.
Thank you, Dr. Thomason, and we'll look forward to that. That would be awesome to have in your superintendent's report to see so we can compare and kind of look at that a little more closely. We have other questions. Mrs. Reese?
Also, I know when we initially looked at this, can you perhaps have Dr. Thomason share with us what that would look like financially? I mean, based on how many people do we have at full carryover? We obviously don't need specifics, but financially, what would that look like if this were today? These are people at full carryover, assuming they would still be at full carryover. This is how many people at that cap we would have. If we can just get an idea of what that financial impact would be. And I agree, Mr. Glover, hopefully there's not. Obviously, we had a different budget. We're hoping there's not going to be huge budget cuts, but everything happening, you never know what they're going to give us and what they're going to take back, and you never know what they're going to mandate for us to do that they're not going to fund that we will have to come up with. So I'm just trying to keep that whole scenario in mind, and is this the right time to do it? It doesn't mean that in the future it wouldn't be the right time. It doesn't mean that there's not a compromise. Instead of going to 3 weeks, going to 2. I certainly understand it for this year because it was all hands on deck. But what does that look like financially for us in the future? Just a rough guess. I mean, if we had a 2%,
Certainly.
something.
I could work with Mr. Holland and Dr. Thomason and provide you an example. As Mr. Glover shared earlier, typically that's what districts do. They put in a budget component and say, on average, these are the number of individuals that have left or not left, and you could probably reasonably assume 2 to 3 potentially would be a good budget planning purposes in the future. As you said, President Kalar, we are very fortunate that we had 100% administrator return rate this year, and Dr. Foley and I were just talking about this yesterday. We've got some wonderful additions to the district office, and we're excited about them as we continue to do the good work and move positively. One thing I do want to mention, though, and I've had this conversation with Dr. Thomason as well as my colleagues, but with the professional policy GCD, one thing that is hard from an administration in terms of administration follow-up is that the policy had that the rollover gave them an extra month. So instead of rolling over at the end of the fiscal year, which is typically when everything rolls over June 30th, it rolled over a vacation specifically for administrators at the end of July, which meant that the payroll team had to always manually go in there, roll everything over, manually go in there and adjust for the administrators for July. I understand the spirit, giving them an extra month because July 1's a new fiscal year, and a lot of times July is the month where you could take that last bit of time off before the new school year started. But from an administration part, you're rolling over everybody, then you're going back in for almost 70 to 80 people and manually adjusting them. So that's not ideal. So that's something that you'll notice is a change in the policy as a result too.
So may I? The other piece that might help the board members make a decision is what our buyback policy is for how many days and what we pay out and all that. So,
President Kaler, members of the board, the vacation buyback policy would be earned vested vacation, and so whatever you're allowed to carry over on the books would be the buyback for a vacation policy.
Okay.
For general leave is a different.
Gotcha. Okay. Duh. Sorry.
And the general leave does have a max too.
Recording.
No, and
Can
the
we
other
rewind?
dynamic part of that too is, again, you may remember on the addendums, only certain groups of employees can actually buy back vacation. And right now it's primarily at the cabinet and director 1 and 2 level. So it's at the district office versus at the sites.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, but it's in consent. So motion carries. Motion carries 5-0. And we will get second reads on those policies. It's okay. We're going to move on to 6.1, which is our monthly financial report. Mr. Gary Holland is here. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Holland tonight? Okay. We need to rewind sometime. All right. Thank you very
President Kaler,
much,
members of
Mr.
the
Holland.
board, a reminder that the next board meeting that Mr. Holland would be doing the presentation for the budget for the 2021 school year. So that would be an important one for us next time.
We will be anxious to see those fabulous numbers from the state. All right, moving on to 6.2. Let me get there. I move that the governing board approve the agreement with ESI as the service provider for current employees who elect to participate in the phased retirement option for variable hour employees and substitute teachers for the 2020-2021 school year.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or concerns? I knew Mr. Glover had something to say to this. Our yearly conversation.
It is our yearly conversation. I think this is fine for subs because I don't think we have a system that complies with the proposition that was passed for state law. So I'm totally fine with that part of it. But I do worry about our teachers selling themselves out for some short-term gain versus some long-term, which they would be, if they stayed in the state retirement, would be better. This system was designed to solve a teacher shortage, and we talk about being data-driven. We still have a teacher shortage. This hasn't fixed that at all. So you got 2 benchmarks as a teacher in the state of Arizona, your 80 points or your 30 years, and those are big milestones. I would be okay with this if it was for somebody after 30 years because the multiplier is not as big. But when someone sells themselves short of 30 years for a little bit of extra money on the front end, they're cutting their income shorter on the long term. I guess if you're planning to die 2 years after you retire, it's a good deal. But if you're planning to live like 20 years, it's not really in your best interest. But it depletes the pensions. It depletes our pension fund at a faster rate. It doesn't strengthen it for sure, no matter what they'll tell you. At first this was just for teachers, but now it's classified and admins, and it prevents classified staff there's not that many opportunities to rise. And the same thing for administrators. There's not that many opportunities to rise. So you're denying opportunities for people that stick around that could just retire. I think it's a disservice to the district, actually. So I would be perfectly happy if we crossed out admins or just rewrote the contract to cover substitutes. That would be a step in the right direction to me. I mean, if you want to retire, to me, just retire. It depletes the number of people that are in our health insurance pool. I guess they're older, so there's probably arguments one way or the other, but it's less people in there. No offense. I'm there too. I probably should stop talking, but you know, and then ESI gets they get money for just being a pass-through. So I'm gonna again, for probably the fourth time in a row, vote against this. But how many do we? I mean, I'm making a big deal. This isn't really even a Higley issue. This is more of a statewide issue, and some are way worse. But we had like 2 people on it last year or something. Do you know?
Mr. Glover, yes, during my tenure here, the max we've ever had is 2 at a time. And the last individual just turned over, came back to us as of January 1 of this year, January 1 of 2020.
All right.
So
I'm making a big deal out of it, but I'll tell on behalf of my statewide colleagues, I guess. So thank you for humoring me.
President Kaler?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. One point of clarification for the board, I know that Mr. Glover knows, is that after you retire, you will have to be not an employee of ASRS for 1 year, but then you can come back after that 1 year. And that's what we're talking about, as some of those individuals do that too. So just wanted to make that clarification.
I think the word you've used in the past, Mr. Glover, is double dip. So, and I understand that, and yet our hands are kind of tied in as far as still using this. And but I do appreciate your yearly reminder for us. I really do. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion carries 4-1-0. 4-1. 4-1, sorry. Motion carries 4-1. Okay. Now we are going to go on to 6.3. I make a motion that the governing board approves the renewal of vendor contracts for fiscal year 2020 through 2021. Any questions or comments for all these contract renewals? No, thank you for bringing these forward. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. 6.4. I move that the governing board approves the disbursement of the results-based funding monies from the state. The total of the $761,447.01 shall be allocated to qualifying Higley Unified School District employees that were employed in the 2017 to 2018 school year and still employed with Higley during the 2019 to 2020 school year.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or concerns?
President Kaler?
Yes, Dr.
I
Thompson.
did have a question from the board in regards to why some of those Group A teachers, so those are the teachers that work at the schools, receive different amount of monies. It's because the state legislature requires now, as they do change on a regular basis, that the majority of the funds earned by the school are used at the school that earn the funds, are given to the school that earn the funds. And so that's why you would see in the Group A column that those individuals have a different amount all across the board, because there's different amounts of teachers and there's different amount of students that earn the funds. And so that's the reason why for those Group A teachers having different amounts.
Mrs.
Dr. Thomason, can you just briefly talk to us about, I know that there was several different processes that we used. Different districts do it different ways. I get we have some schools that were A schools but barely missed the cutoff. And I get that. I'm trying to, and I keep in my head all the time Mr. Witovich saying a long, long time ago, we're Higley unified, and I try and keep that. But when we did not meet, we weren't an A school, obviously you have to be that to get those funds, but when you didn't even qualify as an A school, I'm explain to me that thought process.
Yes, President Kaler, members of the board, we did have a large group of teachers, administrators, and staff that were on the committee to help put this together. And they will all tell you that they know that I am not a fan of results-based funding. I believe that all of our teachers at all of our schools work extremely hard, and I did not get my way on this one in the committee, but the committee did work thoughtfully and respectfully with everyone through it, and it was the committee's consensus to utilize the formula that we have, that there would be 3 tiers. Tier A would be the staff and the individuals that worked at the school that received the results-based funding. Tier B would be all other A schools in the district, and Tier C would be a school that would be a B school or better. So in our district, we have 12 A schools and 1 B school. We had 5 schools that earned the results-based funding, and that's where you would see the 3 tiers. Once again, I am not a fan of results-based funding, but this was a committee that worked through it and came to consensus on how we should put this together. Probably one of the most difficult committees I've been on. And once again, if I had had my brothers, we would be sharing this equally across the board, because all of our teachers are rock stars, and I support all of our teachers. But that's not the way the state has set it up.
Thank you, Dr. Thomason. I was on the committee last year, and I remember how difficult those meetings were. And then this year, halfway between meetings, they changed it on us. The state changed that. So again, hats off to the committee. Thank them for their hard work. I know this is not an easy one. And I know that there's going to be, we can't make everybody happy on this one. We just can't. And
twice as difficult when you're doing it virtually.
oh, correct. In Zoom meetings, even better. So I get it. Mr. Glover.
Yeah, well, thank you, President Kaler. I like it. I think it's fair. I still don't. I'm not quite sure why the green tier couldn't all be like $2,000, but I guess I'll ask you more later. But what I want to know is, when will the teachers know this, and when will they see their money?
Mr. Glover, members of the board, we are hoping for approval tonight, and then the disbursement will be in the last check of June, which I believe is June 30th. And we'll let them know if the board successfully approves this tonight. We'll let them know that the disbursements are coming and when they can anticipate payment.
President Kaler, one other question. We have multiple teachers who travel to multiple schools. Do they get multiple payouts, or just the highest payout, or how does that work? I mean, we have music teachers that go to 2 or 3 different schools that may be in different tiers. How does that work?
That's a great question, Vice President Reese. So what we had implemented when this first started was that every year those traveling teachers are assigned a homeschool. That homeschool is where they are evaluated that year. So during that time period, that's what we identify as the school and where they fall in this amount. That has certainly brought some concern to some teachers because they feel they equally participate at each place, but it seemed to be the most equitable way to handle that without having to, say, well, I worked at that school too and they got that amount, so, being able to address their questions. It's not always been the well-liked decision, as Dr. Thomason said. There's been lots of different challenges through this process, but ultimately that is where we ended.
So we look back at the 2017, 2018 year, wherever they were at that time. Okay, perfect.
Correct.
Thank you.
And this was the funding that Governor Ducey said was not coming, and then it was here. So if I remember correctly, he said with the 2020, there was going to be no more results-based funding, but then it is here, so we don't even know what's happening for next year, if this funding will be there or not.
President Kaler, they did put legislation in place to carry it through for, I believe, 5 years. And so they do have it at least anticipated, but every year some of the rules and the amounts change depending on what's in the state's coffers. We don't know what next year holds, especially with a loss of revenue of 3 months across the state. So, we'll just wait and see what the cards hold.
I want to say what Mrs. Kaler said is, these are not easy conversations to have, and I too am not a fan of the results-based funding. I agree. I think that we have teachers that work really, really hard for the results for their students, and they can be successful with their class even if their entire school did not meet the point threshold. And I don't think that defines them. And so I like, don't get me wrong, I like the additional money. I don't like how it puts the school districts in this predicament. And so I know all of our teachers work really hard. You don't go into this profession to not. So I want to thank everyone on the committee who sat through this to create these difficult conversations and determinations. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Reese. I do want to let you know that I do take this very personally. Some of the decisions that I make as a superintendent do affect these funds on where I put gifted programs and where I put special needs programs. So I take this very personally. I'm not in favor of this. My teachers across the district are all very hard workers, and I'm proud of them all. And I do take it personally because I personally make the decision that will put extra money in someone else's pocket. And so it's a very, very difficult process for me.
Yes, I just want to reiterate that all of our teachers work so hard, and just because maybe they're having, some really gifted kids, they work just as hard. And also that teacher that might have more growth in a student work just as hard. So I get this is one of those conundrums, I believe is the word.
But
So,
President Kaler, man, I
Yes.
just want to give props to everybody because there's a lot of school districts, like that have 40 or 50 schools and like 6 schools get it, and that's all that sees it. So this is something to share, and you're sending us a strong message that, it's good luck. You had a great 6th grade class that, really achieved, but, maybe next year you don't. We can't control who comes into your class, so at least you're sharing it equally. I don't know, are other, probably not too many others share it across their whole district in the same manner we do. I would say no.
President Kaler, members of the board, I believe that Higley Unified School District is one of the only districts that I know that share it with all of our certified teaching staff.
I just want to thank you guys too, because I can only imagine what that committee was like when you discuss somebody's paycheck and money, and if they're going to get it. I can't imagine what that room was like, and I just thank you guys for those difficult decisions. I will reiterate, I don't like results-based funding because it pits us all against each other in some way. But I'm thankful that our staff, the people on that committee, decided that to give a little something even to those ones who maybe couldn't get there this year. So I want to thank them.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, and President Kaler, members of the board. I want to let you know that next year is going to look different too, because our state legislation and all their infinite wisdom does not allow a school that did not earn the funds to receive any of those funds if they have received it for 3 years. This is the 3rd year. It also requires schools that earn the funds to continue growing, and we know that when you hit 100% or you get to the top, there is no room for growth. And so next year, because it's the 4th year, is going to look way different, and I don't look forward to those meetings and how that's going to come out and look across the state, but be prepared again for something different next year.
Thank you. I'm just tempted to say that it's the legislature that makes these decisions, and we have an election in November, everyone, and if you don't like it, send somebody there who also doesn't like it, and we can put an end to it and put money directly back into the classroom.
thank you, Mr. Glover. Any other comments, questions? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. On to the long-awaited KEV group. 6.5. I move that the board approves the creation of additional bank account for clearing credit card payments specifically for the online payment system through KEV group.
Second.
Can we have a hoorah? that Kev Group is coming our way, and our high schools, well, everybody is going to an online payment system. There will be no more, there are still Kingdom Days, there are still Black Hawk Days. We're not taking those away, but they should go much smoother. There shouldn't be lines for 3 hours, and everybody is very excited that this is coming to us. Mr. Holland.
Does that work now? Cool. All right. So good evening, President Kaler, and members of the board, Dr. Thompson, cabinet. Yes, thank you very much for approving the bank account. We will need that. We will need that yesterday, but they didn't tell us in time. So I know one question, we have been working every single day trying to get this system implemented. And every day it seems to be something new. But I know there's been a question from everybody's mind as to when exactly is the training going to take place. So I will tell you that we've been on conference calls all day today, and we finally have a training date. So the dates for the high schools will start next Monday, the 15th. The training is going to be, the plan is, you'll have a one-on-one personalized training session, and they'll go over the purchase orders and the deposit aspect of that system. And then the training for the middle schools and elementaries will take place once they return back in July. Okay, so the training is set up based off of a one-on-one training, so that each of them will have the opportunity to go over their specific school and their specific, what it looks like for them. And then there'll be a larger group training that will also take place, which will go over the whole school cash catalog system. So yes, there's still a lot of work to be done. And I did speak with both of our bookstore managers today multiple times at the high schools and letting them know that, yes, the training will take place starting on Monday, and basically it will be set up geared to what works best for them. So they have sent dates to Kev Group of what the dates they would be available to do that personalized training. And so just know that that has taken place. And then the next piece will be a larger group session, as I mentioned, for all of the bookkeepers, bookstore managers. Yeah, and then for the next category, as I mentioned, the school cash catalog, that will be also a one-on-one personalized training.
That's awesome. I'm sure everybody's thrilled that this is coming to fruition, especially the moms of our high schools. Mrs. Reese.
Mr. Holland, just a quick question. Who at this point are we going to have kind of as our train the trainer, so that obviously if things are coming up, we hire new staff, things like that, that we can get them trained quickly?
Well, we will have that training option back still through Kev Group, because it'll be ongoing. But we will have staff that Jolene, who does our student activities and is also our accounts receivable. We also have a new staff accountant, which you just approved this evening, which is Justin's replacement. Mm-hmm. She'll also be involved in this training, and will be one of the ones to do the train-the-trainer model.
Well, because that's where my more concern is. Obviously, if we needed a bank account yesterday and we keep getting new information all the time, that I don't want to have to rely on them if we get new staff to train. So if we can make sure we have somebody, my recommendation would be multiple people, so we're not in the situation as with Justin leaving and he had the primary knowledge on this. We do need a subject matter expert for sure, that we can make sure we have multiple people who can step into this so that we're not trying to scramble at the last minute. So,
No, we will. We will have more than just one person because we don't want to be in this position again.
right, and I mean, you guys all know how crazy our high school days are and trying to get that to work. And so, yes, if we can make sure we have multiple people prepared so that we have trainers available, subject matter experts, people who can do troubleshooting. Obviously, we have to rely on Kev Group, but having people here too.
Correct.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. And let's hope that there's not a virus that wipes everything out next year, so they
Right.
have to. Kev Group re-entered.
You know, I mentioned the bank account being needed yesterday. If they would have given us plenty of information ahead of time that we knew we needed it, we would not be in this particular situation. But it
Right.
seems every day we're getting something new. That's why I sent a not so nice email maybe
Oh,
yesterday and was able to get a conference call this morning with the VP.
awesome. Well, thank
And
you
so
for that.
now we have
Is
some
that
movement.
like sales?
Huh?
Is that like sales, what we were talking about earlier? Yes, it's always a growing process when we're implementing a new program and it's like, oh yeah, well, do you have this? And it's like, wow, where'd that come from? So yeah, no, for sure, I get that. So when we get up and running, just to make sure we're a little more self-sustainable, but totally understand that, and when you're implementing something, these things come up, so.
And I think both, I mean, the moms of Higley and Williamsfield will volunteer first to try it out. So if you need some, sample guinea pigs, we'll be first in line. Keep that in mind. All right. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our 6.6. I move that the governing board approves the renewal of vendor contracts for fiscal year 2020 through 2021. And you can see above the procurement rules and all the different vendor contracts. Any questions or comments? Thank you for putting that together. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion
Aye.
carried. Oh, sorry, Mr. Glover, I cut you off. Motion carries 5-0. All right, kind of wrapping up this section of our meeting. Future agenda items, 7.1. So we're definitely going to have our work study on June 24th about reopening schools. And then we're going to have our HPAL, a technology update, how we prepare students for life beyond, our athletic also coming. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add? Mr. Wojtovich? No? Okay, moving on. I move that the governing board will meet to discuss the evaluation of the superintendents of performance.
Second.
Do I have to read something? Oh, discussing for pursuant to ARS 38-431.3A1.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We will reconvene after our executive session. Thank you.